Make lifestyle choices to enhance your well being. This is Natural Inspirations. You are listening to Natural Inspirations Podcast, the show where we have conversations with local natural health experts on the Space and Treasure Coast. Welcome to episode 41. I'm Chris Urquhart. Today we're talking to registered dietitian nutritionist Diane Kingsley about healing and preventing diabetes with nutrition.
Hi, Diane. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, as a registered dietitian who commonly works with people who may be pre-diabetic or have diabetes, can you share a little bit how food can impact their situation?
Absolutely. So food plays a pivotal role with blood sugars, specifically the carbohydrates. If a person is eating high amounts of simple carbs, then that can cause the blood sugars to spike. And if that happens for long periods of time, that can ultimately potentially end up putting the person at risk for diabetes. So with the nutrition, it can really be one of those things, one of those tools to help with lowering those blood sugars just by watching the intake of carbohydrates.
So, what are some indicators I could look for that would tell me I might need to make some of those lifestyle changes?
So if you've had a lab test done and you're seeing that your glucose is high, if it's higher than 100, that's an indicator. It's just one snippet of information in one moment of time, though. Your better indicator is what's called an HbA1c, and that's a blood test that shows where your blood sugar average has been for 3 months. So a normal A1C is going to be upwards of 5.6. From 5.6 to 7, you're in pre-diabetic. Well, actually 5.6 to 6.5, you're in pre-diabetic numbers. And typically, if you're 6.5, you do get a diagnosis of diabetes. 6.5 and above is a diagnosis of diabetes. So if you find that your lab markers are indicating you're in pre-diabetic numbers, nutrition can be key to be able to bring those numbers down into lower numbers. And with diabetes, it is a genetic disease. So if you have family members who have diabetes, you do have a higher genetic predisposition to potentially have diabetes.
What are some of the things that you recommend if someone sees those numbers and they're in that situation? What would you recommend as far as lifestyle changes that they could make?
What I would recommend is seeing a dietitian. I'd love to assist people in showing them how to eat in a way that they're balancing their meals so that their blood sugars stay stable. And I teach what's called carb counting, and it teaches how many carbohydrates to have per meal and with snacks to keep the blood sugars low. All foods have different amounts of carbohydrates, and there are some foods that are higher in carbs than others. So those foods you certainly want to moderate down, and then the other foods you can have an abundance of. So as an example, those starches like rice and pasta and potatoes, they're very dense in carb. So a cup of those starches is 45 grams of carb, and 45 grams of carb to 60 is really where you should be in a meal. And a cup is really not a whole lot of food.
Right.
But that same cup of vegetables like broccoli or carrots is only 15 grams of carb.
Mm.
So the key really is to know where those foods that are really dense in carb, what those foods are, and which ones to limit down, and then which ones to replace those with.
So, what are some things that you recommend for helping control blood sugar, or perhaps maybe there's someone you've worked with where you can kind of give us an idea of how it could help us?
Okay, so I had a gentleman come in and his A1C was 12. And on the scale, that's an indicator that those blood sugars are upwards in like the 300 range. That's very high. And with the help of just changing his diet, he did start an exercise program as well. He was able to get his blood sugars down into lower numbers. And he would tease me because he would come into the office and it was on, he and his wife used to plan on coming in on Fridays, like the latest appointment at 4 o'clock, because right after our session, he wanted to go to a pizza place and pig out on pizza and beer. But the thing with nutrition, it's not like all or nothing. If you, for the most part, are watching your intake of carbohydrates and you're balancing your meals, you're watching your calorie intake, then every once in a while, if you want to go out and you want to have like a big bowl of pasta or those real starchy carbs, that's okay to do. That's going to be an outlier number, an outlier high blood sugar that you're experiencing, but it's not going to it's not going to deter your goals to keep those blood sugars down for the most part.
Now I see what you're saying. I thought you were going to say he wanted to come on Friday afternoons so they could go out afterwards and he would want to eat healthy because we just had this. But no, it's because he's already had his numbers done and he knows he can blow them up afterwards, right? Oh,
Exactly. Yeah, he wanted to celebrate his win for the month and then he wanted to go blow it.
hey,
But
yeah.
But it was amazing to me, that case, because to bring those blood sugars down, the A1C down from a 12 to normal numbers to 5.6, but still be able to enjoy those meals like pizza every once in a while, that is certainly a win.
Right. So how often, how quickly could someone feel the difference in when they shift their diet, similar to like the case you were just describing? And when you shift your diet, how quickly can you feel the difference or feel better?
Well, if a person's blood sugars are high for a long period of time and they do start making dietary changes and they do start seeing those blood sugars drop down into lower numbers and normal numbers, sometimes there can be an acclimation period that a person can go through where they actually feel off at those normal numbers. If a person's ever experienced low blood sugars before, what can happen is they can feel shaky, they can get nervous, can get sweaty, they can have what's called hangry, where they feel hungry, angry, or confused. But if a person is going through those symptoms and they test and their blood sugars are normal, that can be an indicator that the person's just needing to stay at those normal numbers for a little time to get acclimated to those lower numbers again. But what I typically see in my practice is when patients have those high numbers and they're finally able to get down into lower numbers, their energy levels start skyrocketing. They don't feel like they have to nap in the afternoon anymore, and their sense of well-being improves. And with the exercise too, I do try and stress that it is important to get some form of exercise, at least 30 minutes 3 times a week, because what exercise does is our muscles actually have sugar stores in them, glycogen stores. And when we're exercising, we're using up those glycogen stores, and our body needs to replenish those stores in the muscles, and we'll pull from our bloodstream first. So if a person is testing their blood sugars and they see a high, they can go take a walk for 15 minutes or half an hour and test again, and those blood sugars will drop down naturally. So that can really be key, along with diet. The exercise can really be key to help bring those blood sugars down. And what does exercise do? It also helps to release serotonin and dopamine, so those feel-good chemicals.
Right. Of course, it's good. So in general, what's your philosophy when working with people? I mean, do you subscribe to particular diets per se, or what's your approach?
I have a non-diet approach. I think it's really important to not diet, especially if you are looking for weight loss. It's more important to learn how to eat in a healthy, balanced way. And I really love the Mediterranean diet. I do promote that in my practice. The Mediterranean diet is one of the healthiest ways to eat. And in fact, I think it just won another award 5 years in a row to be the healthiest way of eating. Above all diets. And it's not really a diet, it's just a healthy way of eating. And in my practice, I have more of a whole body holistic approach with patients. It's not just about nutrition, it's not just about exercise, it's also about stress levels and energy levels. How is sleep? We look at all facets of a person's life and their health and well-being, because even if one thing is off, that can carry through to affect the rest of the person's health and well-being. As an example, if a person's not sleeping well, If they're only getting say 3 or 4 hours of sleep at night, what does that do? That increases cortisol. And the whole next day, an increase in cortisol is going to increase another hormone called ghrelin, our hunger hormone, making us more hungry. And it decreases another hormone called leptin, which helps us to stay full. So if a person is having a hard time sleeping and they're not able to lose weight, it's really important to look at that piece of the puzzle. Like, how are we going to get a person to be able to sleep better? And that can sometimes correct the other issues like weight management.
That makes a lot of sense. I know personal experience, something that if I've had a bad night or haven't slept, the next day you're craving things like sugar and stuff that'll pump up your blood sugar and keep you going. So
yeah, and pump up your energy levels because you're feeling tired.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today, Diane. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
And for those listening, be well, stay connected.